We are Group 1 and we're going to discuss the theory of Charles Darwin. The theory of evolution by natural selection was first formulated in Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species. It was published in 1859, and in his book, Darwin described how organisms evolve over generations through the inheritance of physical or behavioral traits. As National Geographic explains, the theory starts with the premise that within a population, there is variation in traits, such as beak shape in one of the Galapagos finches Darwin studied. Darwin wasn't the first or only scientist to develop a theory of evolution. Around the same time as Darwin, British biologist Alfred Russel Wallace independently came up with the theory of evolution by natural selection, according to the national history. However, this had little impact. The concept of evolution as a historical event was a hot topic among biologists and geologists prior to Darwin's book because there was so much evidence accumulating. But I suspect biological evolution hadn't really impinged on people outside of the academic bunker. Dr. P. John D. Lambshead, a retired science research leader in marine biodiversity, ecology, and evolution at the National History Museum, London, told All About History magazine. As long as science knew of no mechanism to explain how evolution happened, it could be safely dismissed as a crank idea. And also, Darwin defined evolution as descent with modification, the idea that species change over time, give rise to new species, and share a common ancestor. Darwin's revolutionary theory was that new species arise naturally by a process of evolution rather than having been created forever immutable by God. According to the well-established creationist theory of Darwin's day, the exquisite adaptations of many species, such as the hinge of the bivalve shell and the wings and plumps on seed, dispersed by air, were compelling evidence that a designer had created each species for its intended place in the economy of nature. Darwin had wholeheartedly accepted this theory, which was bolstered by the biblical account in Genesis, until his experiences in Galapagos Island began to undermine this way of thinking about the biological world.
Adaptation, an organism's failure that was functionally designed by the process of evolution by selection, is known as a Darwinian adaptation. Functional design excludes explanations based on mutation, drift, incidental effect, and phylogenetic legacy. An implicit reconstruction of the selection that led to the adaptation is necessary to understand its functional design. Individual traits and Darwinian adaptations may currently be beneficial, detrimental, or neutral. The Darwinian definition of adaptation is at odds with one more recent interpretation of the term. Many studies on human and non-human species in behavioral ecology have inconsistent meanings. Its main goal is to compare current adaptability to Darwinian adaptation. Current adaptability is not a true scientific prediction of a Darwinian adaptation hypothesis. Some discussion points surrounding the current adaptiveness view of adaptation in the evolutionary literature are assessed. Contrary to assertions made by some who support current adaptiveness, the environment in which humans and other organisms have evolved to adapt and allow scientists to understand the functional design of Darwinian adaptations. For example, how do chameleons change their color? The ability to quickly change color is a characteristic of chameleons. People frequently believe that they do this to blend in with the surroundings. The majority of the time, chameleons alter their color to control their body temperature or to communicate with other chameleons. Chameleons cannot produce their own body heat, so they must alter the color of their skin to keep a comfortable body temperature. While a hotter chameleon might turn pale to reflect the sun's heat, a cold chameleon might turn dark to absorb more heat. Chameleons can blend into their surroundings or use camouflage to hide from predators like snakes and birds. However, they typically rely on their inherently blending greenish brown color to blend in. They prefer to remain motionless and hidden when threatened, but they do have backup defense strategies available. They have the ability to flatten out to appear larger and to strike with their feet and jaws.
The process through which populations of living things adapt and change is known as the natural selection. A population's individuals are naturally varied, which means that they are all unique in some ways. This means that an individual's traits may vary depending on the environment that they live in. Charles Darwin was the one that developed this theory. Charles Robert Darwin, born in February 12, the year 1809, an English naturalist whose scientific theory of evolution by natural selection became the foundation of modern evolutionary studies. Charles Darwin began a journey in September 1835 that would take him from Sydney to Galapagos. Darwin noticed that the same species of animal varied on different islands in the Galapagos. For instance, the iguanas varied between islands. Iguanas of one species lived on land and ate cactus, while those of another species spent much of their time in the ocean, swimming and diving for seaweed. Darwin questioned the existence of two species of iguanas that were so dissimilar from one another on the same collection of islands. Darwin also saw gigantic tortoises in the Galapagos. Two people could actually ride on these tortoises because they were so big. Darwin observed that many species of tortoises lived on islands with various climatic conditions. He realized that the tortoises possessed qualities that enabled them to survive in their specific environments. For instance, the shells and necks of tortoises that consumed plants close to the ground were rounded. On islands with tall plants, tortoises possessed longer necks and upward bent shells that allowed them to lengthen their necks. Darwin started to hypothesize that differences in environments cause features to evolve through time in species. Darwin started to believe that creatures develop changes to help them survive in their surroundings.